Good morning, everyone. Mr. Clerk, do we have quorum?
Mr. Chair, there is quorum.
Great. Hopefully we can get through the agenda before we lose quorum. I will call the meeting to order, and I need a mover and a seconder for the agenda. I moved by Catherine, seconded by Dawn. So you'll see there's the agenda printed in your package. Does anyone have any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we will approve the agenda as printed in that order. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Next item is the confirmation of minutes from June 20th, our last meeting. I need a mover from that was in attendance at that meeting. And a seconder. Moved by Mac, seconded by Councillor Schell. Is there any errors or omissions to the minutes from June 20th? Seeing none, we will approve the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. One second. The 1 Emily Street, right? Yeah, so Mac has declared a conflict or a pecuniary interest on 1 Emily Street, so we'll remind you when that comes up. It doesn't need to be in writing, but you can get that in whenever during the meeting. Okay, so let's keep moving. There are no briefings. I see. So the first item is actually business D, statutory business. It's a heritage permit outside the Heritage District, so part 4, 103 Stewart Street. So we'll get a member from staff to introduce that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the application before you is located on Queens Main campus. The property is the subject of a heritage easement agreement between the city and the university. The subject property includes a number of heritage buildings, including Grand Hall and Ontario Hall and Theological College and a number of others. The application before you today is specifically with regard to Kingston Hall, which is a 3.5-story limestone building built in 1901 to 1903. It's rated as very good in the agreement for its heritage value, built by architects out of Toronto, Simons and Ray. It was used partially as a military hospital during the First World War and barracks for the military in the Second World War. Some of the character-defining elements of this property include its limestone cladding, its paired and triple windows, its round-arched and pilastered window surrounds, and the buttresses. So the application before you today is the application. Actually, the owners are doing a number of interior alterations to this lecture hall in the lower level of this building, and as a result, and of course, interior alterations in this property do not require Heritage Act approval, but the result of those alterations have resulted in some exterior changes. So what is before this committee today for consideration is the relocation of a window and a door on the east side, which is noted here. The installation of 2 small air compressor units in the front corner, and the relocation of vents in 2 rear windows on the north elevation. So these are the 2 current openings that are to be swapped. There's a current exterior steel door and a window, and they are to be relocated. The windows on this building, probably mid-20th century windows. While they're not impacting the heritage of the building, they certainly aren't attributes in their own right. The alteration will not change the opening size, width or height of these openings. There is a small step to accommodate the window, which will be a little shorter on the new location, and there'll be a new concrete pad where the door comes out. The compressor units to the rear, which you can see in the bottom picture, are to be located just in front of an existing unit, and as I mentioned, they are in the southeast corner of this building. and they are to be set on a small concrete pad as well. The windows at the back, the upper sashes or the upper glazing are to be replaced with steel louvers, similar to what you find elsewhere on this building. And this is at the back of the building, the north side of the building. So in terms of our review, we've reviewed the material that was submitted by the applicants. As I noted, the windows are not heritage attributes, and there'll be no changes to the height and the width of those openings, so they can be reversed. The air conditioning units, the exhaust and intake vents are in the upper panes, and they're similar to what is found elsewhere in the building, and are to be a sort of a gray tone, so not real noticeable. The new compressor units out front, while they will be visible, they're in line with similar structures, and the wall in this location has very few openings or ornamentation. It's also, given the scale of this 3.5-story limestone landmark building, these small units will have a minimal impact, and staff recommend approval of these units. We also recommend that they be painted gray to help them blend further. So we circulated this application to our internal agents. A building application is in already. The engineering department noted that a noise study is not required for this alteration. However, they have suggested that the owner consider undertaking one to ensure that the noise generated by these new units will not impact any adjacent sensitive uses. And so we've provided that to the applicant. The condition further notes that if there is any mitigation measures needed to address any potential impacts, such as screening, that staff have a chance to review those. Further heritage approval isn't required. This was circulated to members of this committee, and no concerns were raised. And Mr. Chair, we recommend approval with a few conditions and the extra clause noting the consideration of the noise study. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just reading that last clause because I've never seen that before at Heritage. How does that interact with the Heritage Act? It's not clear to me how the Heritage Committee can address something that's not generally addressed by the Heritage Act. Yes, Mr. Newman.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This was a condition that was heavily discussed amongst staff and upper management. You'll note the language there is that the owner shall consider the completion of a noise study. We don't have, under the Ontario Heritage Act, the ability to require a noise study. We don't have any objections from a heritage impact perspective of the compressor units themselves. There have been other instances where these units have caused noise-related issues, not related to heritage matters, but related to compatibility matters that we wanted to, somewhat as a courtesy, advise the applicant that they ought to do their due diligence and make sure that noise is not going to be an issue, but we don't have the teeth, in our view, under the Ontario Heritage Act to require a noise study at this time.
Okay, if I understand correctly, this is sort of a suggestion the staff thinks is important, and that's why it's included here. There's nothing specifically in the Heritage Act, and that's why it says shall consider, which isn't binding. Of course, none of the only thing I can think of would be that the Heritage District might be within earshot of this unit because the Heritage District starts at City Park, right? So that makes it, I guess, relevant enough to consider anyway. So that's fine. Thank you for clarifying that. Does any other questions from members of the committee? Councillor Schell.
Reading where the heritage comes in is if they decide to do mitigative measures such as screening, the screening would have to be approved under the Heritage Act, I think, which makes sense. We don't want them to just throw up some black plastic or something. Thanks.
Right. Yes, so the noise study might recommend screening, and then it would impact the heritage. Okay. Any other questions? Don.
Yes, when I submitted my response, I did raise a fairly significant question, which I responded to. Basically, the question was why not put the compressor units at the rear of the building rather than the side, which is just a few feet from a major walkway. And, you know, I think the committee should have an answer to that question.
Well, seeing as we're in questions, I'll ask if staff had a chance to address this concern with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did raise this with the applicant, and they've spent a lot of time preparing these plans to meet their needs. And the application before us is for these compressors in this location, and this is what they're proceeding with, and we've reviewed it on that basis. We have provided this for them to think about, but they have not responded to us in that regard.
So we're still in questions. We'll go to Catherine next.
It's screening again. I was just wondering if it is possible to require screening if the compressors are going to stay in that place. Whether one could, you know, require it because they're unsightly.
Okay, so just to rephrase, weighing of the compressors discussed with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did not address screening with the applicant. We, in the review of this application, felt that these units these two units are going to be smaller than what's there, which we understand. We've asked them to be a gray tone so that they don't stand out against the limestone as much. Screening was considered, but I think we felt that screening would be more of an impact than these units on their own. So it was not something that we pursued. We were okay to support this application as presented.
Thank you. And then I saw Mac.
I think there's a good possibility you've got the compressors out near the front. Is it because probably the maximum length of the compressors to go to the air conditioning units that are, you know, coming out of those vented areas? That's just a guess on my part, but that might be part of the reason why they are where they are.
Okay, we'll go to members of the public who have questions or comments on this file.
Thank you, Peter Garking, to congratulate you for putting in the comment about the noise. I think that it is part of the preservation of heritage to look at all facts, and just because things are not included in the Act does not mean to say that they shouldn't be at least referenced. This is a difficult one because until it's set up, you probably don't know the noise. You've got echoes, you've got stone buildings, you've got 30,000 students as well, and you've got a field right by it. So in fact, a lot of the time, that noise will be the least noise in the area, but at times it could be disruptive. And I'm glad that that comment has been put in to remind Queens to think about that. Thank you.
Okay, so we need a mover and seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Catherine. So a reminder to the committee, this is Part 4 designation, so the recommendation is not the Part 5 process, so we debate, you can propose amendments, deferrals, that kind of thing. Before we go to that, can I just ask staff to give us the date that the decision is required? Just thinking, because we're in the summer, we may not have much leeway, and our next council meeting is until August. It goes with that one anyway. But after that, it's not until September. If it's not necessary.
Mr. Chair, as this application is under the Queen's Agreement, we have approached the owners, or the applicants on behalf of the owners, about their deadline. The agreement is set out that decisions by council are to be done within 40 days of the application, which is quite honestly unmanageable given our timelines. So we have provided an email and got a response from the applicant that they're willing to waive that in this case. So I was looking for a specific date. My memory is that we agreed to just let this play out and that it would go to the next council meeting. So.
Okay, just because if we don't deal with it today, the next council meeting isn't until September. So then the decision by council, if it doesn't go to the August meeting, it wouldn't be till the September meeting. I mentioned it. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any comment or debate? Don?
I have to say I'm delighted with the way this application has been handled by Queens. Many of us are probably aware that air conditioning is an ongoing problem with heritage buildings and with Queens buildings. For many years, Queens had a policy that there was not to be any air conditioning. Gradually that changed, and the new buildings have air conditioning. They have flat roofs, or more or less flat roofs, and the compressor units are put up on the roof and more or less out of sight, so that's okay. But the old heritage buildings that don't have air conditioning, it's more of a problem to install air conditioning and locate the compressors in a reasonable place. What we have here is a situation where the proposal is to put the air conditioning compressors on the side, but that side is a very accessible and prominent part of the building. A lot of traffic goes by it just a few feet away, and I really think that there needs to be more planning from Queens about how they are going to deal with air conditioning in their heritage buildings. Maybe there are other possibilities, but what I heard through Mr. Leary when he discussed this with Queens was basically, this is how we want to do it. We're not prepared to consider alternatives. And I simply think that's, well, disappointing at least. So.
Don, any other comment? Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, will you take the chair so I can comment?
Yes, you have.
As Sydenham District Councillor, so there is another building nearby, Botterill Hall, which had a large unit installed recently. Anyone that lives in the neighborhood knows what I'm talking about. You can hear it for up to 1 kilometer away, depending on the winds and depending on how fast it's running. It was subject to numerous complaints from constituents, and Queen's initial response was similar to what Don just described on this file. Say, well, this is what we're putting in, so that's it. And I believe along the way, they promised some shielding after the numerous complaints and after repeated objections voiced by myself and talking to staff. So I believe they are in the process of installing screening if it's not already there. It is still very, very audible at times, depending on how fast it's running. So that's a different situation. It's a larger unit. It's an HVAC. It's for large air movement. It's a lot bigger than what we're talking about here, but the principle is the same. And here we're talking about the heritage. So if we actually think the heritage is significantly impacted by the installation of this system, with not just the visual impact, but what it would do to all the heritage buildings that are within earshot of having a large, loud mechanical sound. Should also mention that the TET Center, when it was done, had similar complaints about its rooftop system that had to be mitigated. So mentioning it shall consider the completion of a noise study, that's actually a pretty big deal. And I'm glad that staff has gone that route. I think staff is aware of these things that I'm talking about. Once things are installed, it's very difficult to get them removed. So I think it's really, and we heard the comment from the member of the public as well, that this is relevant. So I think this is the time and place, the appropriateness of this in a heritage setting, and with the lack of any kind of collaboration by the part of the applicant. I'm wondering if we need to defer this until the noise study is completed. But I see the we're already past the deadline, so I'll just pause here and hear what Greg has to say about this.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. I think it would benefit the committee to know that there was a series of correspondence back and forth with the engineer that's doing the design of the air compressor units around the issue of noise and potential impacts of noise. This was not just a let's drop a condition in to say that we at least said that you should consider this. There was a series of email and phone call correspondence between Ryan and the applicant to make sure that we had a level of comfort that the actual levels of noise would not, should they go ahead with the noise study, necessitate any sort of mitigative controls. So I'm just looking at the email correspondence that we had, and the engineer is saying that the new units are reasonably quiet, 58 decibels, which is the same as the existing unit. So we're replacing one unit with two units that will have, in the opinion of the engineer, equivalent levels of noise to existing. So I just think that might merit some consideration by the committee in looking at this application and whether or not to defer. Thanks.
Thank you. So comments. I think.
I'm returning the chair. Is that right?
No, I'm still commenting.
Okay. Right.
Member of the committee. So I think if there's a way we could get that condition in, that if the new system is equal to or less in noise output as the current system, like again, we won't know until it's installed, but if there's any way we can put that condition in and have staff monitor it once it's installed, because like I say, once the permit is given, the permit's given, and we never see it again. So maybe I'll ask staff about that. Could we add there's a clause here that says shall consider the completion of a noise study, but I was thinking that's a suggestion that could be ignored because it's non-binding, but we could put a condition in at the end there that would have the same effect, specifically to no increase in noise over the current. And I'm wondering what staff thinks about that. That would just really be holding them to their word about what they said in their email. He's got the chair.
So, yes, Greg, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Actually, I should just correct what I had said before. This is not a replacement. This is two net new units that the engineer has said would have equivalent levels of noise to the existing. The proposal to include a revised condition or a new condition that would say that, for example, staff go and inspect the decibels post-installation. I think we'd have to do a benchmark to see pre-installation what the decibels are and post after. The challenge is if we play that out, so we do the follow-up inspection, and yes, the decibels are higher, we would struggle to know what legal mechanism we have to then go and say that you have to install, say, noise fencing or mitigative controls, because, and I'll just refer you to page 6 of the agenda. It's page 6 of the report itself. We have comments from engineering, and so what they did is in looking at whether or not we should be asking for a noise study, they look at NPC 300, which is the standard that applies. NPC 300 does not apply in this case because the property on which this building sits, there also exists a residence. And so when you have a sensitive use, like a residence occupying the same lot as the generator of a noise, the standards and the requirement for mitigative control do not apply. So I guess I would only offer that to the committee in that we can do it as a courtesy if the owner would like to work with the city on mitigative controls that might benefit the sort of muffling of noise or the control of noise. But I would just caution the committee that we probably wouldn't have the teeth to go in and require them to do it if, say, we did see that the post-installation decibels were higher than existing.
Do you want to respond to that, Peter?
I'd like to rest my time, I guess. I don't know. Well, I'm in a bit of a bind because I don't think I can support an unknown HVAC installation on a heritage building in my district in light of what's happened in other places. The precedent's already been set. The noise can be very disruptive. And we've got an email from the engineer claiming that it will not be disruptive. So even though we may not have legislative teeth to enforce their own assertion, because they've made it, we can't really approve the permit if we don't believe that the assertion is true. And if there's no way of verifying its truth after the fact, we're giving them a blank check, basically. So we either have to vote this down, or we have to put in a condition that will verify that that email is telling the truth. So I guess I will propose an amendment, but I'll have to take a recess to write it out, to add a condition, notwithstanding what staff has said. I believe that condition needs to be there.
Thank you. Before we have that, well, perhaps I could just add a comment that my suggestions weren't just about noise. They weren't primarily about noise. They're about appearance. We do not, in heritage buildings, we don't put air conditioning compressors in the front facade. We put them in the rear facade.
But I proposed an amendment, so you're to something else, and I'm not sure who has the chair. I guess I do if you're speaking.
Yeah, okay.
I think we need to take the recess first, and then
Right.
and then debate the amendment, and then we'll go back to the other aspects of the application.
Right.
Sorry. So I guess seeing as it's my amendment, you need to call the recess and tell us how long it is.
All right, comment recess. Right, we'll return to business, and I have the chair at the moment. Are you going to introduce an amendment? Or
So I have an amendment here. The wording mostly created by Mr. Newman, and I added a couple words for clarity, and I'll read it out. But basically what it does is have staff measure the decibels before and after, and to determine if there is a significant increase, and if there is, it has some language about what we would do about it. But it would all be in staff's hands. Staff would have to work with Queens on that. I'm hoping that it's unnecessary. This is really just a kind of like a fine print condition to put in to make sure that in the event that there's a disruptive noise coming from the system, that we've anticipated it and we won't be caught with no control. So it reads as follows: that city staff measure the current noise in decibels. Well, it's just as comma, bracket dB. So that city staff measure the current noise decibel levels, and following the installation of the 2 new compressor units, measure the subsequent noise decibel levels to determine if an increase in noise levels has occurred. In the event that an increase in noise is significant, city staff shall work with Queen's University to determine if controls are required. Where mitigative controls require alterations to the property, subsequent heritage approval shall be obtained.
So that's going to be condition 6, is that right?
Correct.
So we have a new condition 6, which has just been read to you. Need a sec for that motion? Catherine, thank you. Discussion of the motion? Or it's an amendment, right? It's discussion of the amendment? Matt?
The only, I mean, I think I don't see where it's a whole lot different than what's up there, I guess. Except, I guess, that they're saying if they determine that the potential for adverse effects exists, and I guess we're trying to define a little bit closer what those adverse effects are. It seems pretty much like what is already there.
I think there is a difference in that it's a stated condition that has to be dealt with. It's not just something that can be forgotten.
I guess what we're defining here is that line, if it is determined that the potential for adverse effects exists. We're just expanding upon that thought to make it clear that, okay.
Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Schell?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. First question is, do we have a decibel level in our planning rationale that people cannot exceed?
Staff can answer that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not. I mean, we don't have it in our sort of the planning consideration. Let me back up. So we're not really applying land use planning compatibility considerations in this particular case because we're really looking at the alterations to the heritage attributes of the site. That being said, we did, knowing that noise has been an issue, we did look at whether or not noise generated by this would cause issues with the NPC 300 industry standard. And as I mentioned, our engineering staff have said that in this particular case, we can't apply what would be the standard applied to, say, an abutting sensitive receptor because of the fact that there is a sensitive receptor on the same lot as the air compressor unit. Mr. Carruthers has just mentioned that the urban standard for noise decibels is 45. So, as I mentioned, the engineer has said this would operate at around 56, I believe, is what I mentioned. So, there may be an exceedance of what would otherwise be acceptable if we were measuring to a neighboring sensitive noise receptor. Whether or not the 45 is what you would experience at the property line, we haven't measured that. But in this case, because the industry standard doesn't apply, we haven't applied it in the consideration.
All right.
Thank you. My next line in this was there was not a decision that it needed a noise study. And is that part of it that, I know for new buildings you have to do a noise study generally, but what brings up the reason for a noise study?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We did look at whether or not we could ask for a noise study, and the way we did that was we looked at whether or not this alteration would be subject to site plan control. So there are criteria within our site plan control bylaw, one of which is any proposed alteration to grading, and they are proposing to put a new concrete pad in. It's largely going to sit over top of the existing concrete pad adjacent to the existing compressor unit. There wasn't enough alteration to grading to push us to require site plan control, which would have enabled us to say we want under the Planning Act. So because, again, we have this challenge in the inability to legally ask for, at least in our opinion, to defend and ask for a noise study, we ended up making the ask through a consideration request. But that's sort of the extent to which we looked at whether or not, but we typically would not ask for a noise study with any alteration to a heritage property.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And the last one was to do with, does staff ever go to buildings with a noise meter? I mean, I think this is a very unusual thing we're suggesting, that we actually stand there. a private property owner certainly wouldn't be required to let us do that. So what would be the legal aspect of saying staff have to go with a noise meter?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So what we would do is typically on this, so we look at noise as an issue as it relates to land use planning applications. We commonly ask for noise studies with an alteration to a building or a site. We don't in the heritage context. If we did get complaints as a result of these new compressor units, we would go and look at the decibel levels and the potential implications of that through our noise bylaw. So we would do it as a matter of complaint. We'd go in and do an inspection and enforce if there was a need to enforce as a result of that. But we don't typically go out before, measure current levels, and then measure follow-up levels afterwards.
Thank you. I understand the reasoning behind this and the intent that Queens does need to remember they're part of the community and sometimes they forget. But I don't think this amendment really does more than what's already, which is new. I mean, just for us to even put noise and potential mitigation in the conditions. I think this might be poking the bear when we could do it for more bigger issues with Queens. So I won't be supporting it, but I do certainly understand the reasoning behind it. Thank you.
All right, yes, Peter.
I think before we vote, I should clarify how the rationale a little further, and also what we would do with that final clause. So I guess it would be two. If we left the clause in and passed the amendment, you would have two different pieces talking about the same thing, and that would be confusing. So I would actually ask for that final clause be replaced by a condition number 6. And what does that do? Well, first of all, noise study is a lot more expensive for Queens than what I'm asking for. What I'm asking for is for staff to measure. It's an informal way, really. It's a formalized version of an informal process. The informal process is measure the decibels. We've already got an idea that it's not disruptive currently. We have an email saying that the replacement will not be any more disruptive, and we're just checking to see if that's true. If that's true, then that's the end of it with this condition. And there's no extra cost to Queens. Looks at, if we pass what's there, which is coming from staff, Queens might well commission a noise study because they think they're doing the right thing for the community, and have to go through all this to find out the same thing, that it's not disruptive. So I would prefer to just take the email from the engineer at face value and just leave it at that. But we already have a clause here from staff asking for them to consider a noise study, which I consider to be more intrusive than what I'm asking for. So that's the clarification is, this condition, if passed, will have staff members attend before the work is done, get a baseline, and then be able to go back afterwards if there's complaints. If there are no complaints, there's no reason to think that the noise is significant, that the noise increase is significant, and then therefore nothing happens. But if we don't pass it and we leave this clause in, we might get a redundant noise study. We might get that same backlash, the same poking the bear as Councillor Shaw was just mentioned, the same irritation from Queens by what staff has written here with that clause. So I actually think this is more compatible with the applicant's stated reasons and what they've stated about noise levels. That's why it's a win-win. Thank you.
So for clarification, the motion is really to add the condition 6 that was read and remove the following paragraph. So we should all understand that. Any other discussion on the amendment? All right, then we'll call the question. All those in favor? Yes, opposed? Motion carries, the amendment carries. I return the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Very well done. Okay, before we continue with the amended recommendation, staff wants to have another recess. So we'll take a 2-minute recess. Okay, so procedurally, the clerk brought something to my attention that we couldn't simultaneously pass a new condition and remove the following clause at the same time. So, so the amendment has passed, and now we need another motion to remove the final clause. So moved by Don, seconded by Mac. So that the clause that starts that the owner shall consider the completion of a noise study, all the way, the entire clause, that it be deleted. Any discussion? Okay, we'll vote on it. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Okay. Now we're back to the amended, you're going to take that down, back to the amended recommendation. So just to remind everyone, there's 3 pieces of work: the relocating of the door, the installation of and the installation of 2 louvers. And then there's now 6 conditions. Is there any further discussion on that recommendation? Don?
I'm still unhappy that there's no kind of message going to Queens about the heritage impact of these compressors. And I don't know whether it would be appropriate to add another condition or simply accept that staff will understand that these future negotiations about the heritage agreement should include. What I was thinking about doing was adding another condition along the line that in future heritage-related discussions between the city and Queen's University, that Queen's be encouraged to develop a policy on air conditioning installations in their heritage buildings. But it may not be really appropriate, but I'm willing to make that, move that amendment if you think it's in order.
I think, Mr. Vice Chair, a good point. What I think it belongs in the minutes under your comments because it's not specific. The larger picture of how they deal with with new equipment being installed with upgrades to heritage buildings is sort of. You're acknowledging the precedent it may set with this file, but really that's a different level discussion, and you're raising at this point that this is part of a larger strategy that Queens ought to have for how to do this with other heritage buildings.
So I trust the clerk will include my comments in the minutes.
And you could actually, your written comment as well, make sure it gets in the minutes properly. You do that as well. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, well, we'll vote on the amended recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. It's been amended once. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. So now this next one, Mac, it's your pecuniary. Okay, so 1 Emily Street. We'll get I believe the rest of the heritage permits are all in heritage districts. So, actually all in Sydenham Heritage District, it looks like.
So this application, Mr. Chair, is on Emily Street. The property is known as Edgewater. It's located along the St. Lawrence at the east end of Emily Street, across from McDonald Park, and it contains a 1857 2.5-story limestone landmark building, double house. The heritage value of this property is largely the building, the large stone double house along the lake shore. It is reportedly designed by John Power. However, our local historian has attributed it to William Coverdale. It was built by the Honorable John Hamilton, who had a mansion on Maitland Street right behind this one at one point. This was built for his son and daughter. He was co-founder of Queens and senator for Canada. It's rated significant in the district, and it in the write-up in the district plan or in the designated bylaws before you, it's an impressive and adds the streetscape along Emily Street. So what's before you today is an application that relates to the existing addition at the rear of this building. It's a small a couple small little buildings in addition on the back to this building that are to be removed. This is part of the submission from the applicant, including a picture, I think from the 50s showing or 60s showing the existing building, or the building that was back there at one point, and what is there today. And what is proposed is a new one-story addition with a flat roof. It has a partial pitch over the garage in addition to make it appear like a gable roof. It is to be colored in a gray stucco with trim, doors, accents that match the coloring of the main house. There's also new landscaping proposed. So this is the two-dimensional drawing showing the plan, and the site plan, which shows some new asphalt for the parking area and some landscaping and interlocking. Concept plans were prepared by Mac Jervin and are in your agenda package. So in terms of our review, this is in the old Sydenham District Plan. It's also designated individually under Part 4. Section 522 of the plan notes that new additions to heritage buildings are to be located away from the main street, to the rear of the building. They're not to add to the building, and then further that the height of these additions should not exceed that of the main house, and that they are clearly distinguishable from the main house. In terms of our view, this addition certainly is at the rear. It is clearly subordinate to the large stone building at the road, and will only be visible from the water itself. So we did circulate this internally. The building permit is required for this. There was a question about an opening along the back of the garage in this location, which will have to be fire rated. There was also a couple of zoning considerations that were provided to the applicant, and I believe a minor variance application has been submitted in that regard. This was circulated to members of this committee who noted no concerns. So, Mr. Chair, we recommend approval of this application with a number of conditions.
So we're following the Part 5 procedure. So, Mr. Taylor, you made comments in dash. Were they captured correctly? Okay. So we go to members of the public. We go to members of the public for comment to add to the file.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to staff for the report. I'll support this because it seems that what is proposed now is relatively similar to what was there before and has been taken down. So probably in the years before, there was a heritage committee to examine all of this, that people could just do what they wanted. So it doesn't seem to be jarring to the very impressive building there. I walk down there quite often. I know the house. It's an amazing location. So thank you.
Thank you. That was Mr. Dixon. Any other comments from members of the public? Seeing none. We go to members of the committee. You have a chance now to add final comments to the file before we vote on the recommendation. Yes, Catherine.
I really support what this family are doing. I think that as well as it having been really quite collaborative in terms of the way that the planning has been done, that there was a lot of consideration to neighbours and sight lines for neighbours and so on, and which I think we should remark on it, in that it is not always the case that we think about our neighbours when we are developing these plans. We think about ourselves. I also think that it's such a change, a positive change to what was there before. So congratulations on this.
The clerk, okay, the clerk's got that down. Any other final comments? Seeing none, we will vote. So just to remind you, it is, we need a move and seconder for the following recommendation. The Heritage Kingston supports council approval of the following, and then it talks about the file, which is the removal of a later rear addition and the construction of one-story stucco-clad rear addition with new landscaping treatment with 3 conditions. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Jane. There's no discussion, right? No discussion, it's just a yes or no. Do we support the council's approval? So all those in favor? Opposed, and that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, Mac, you can come back. Happy to report your application passed. We now have 13 Maitland Street. So this is also part 5, same process. Looks like Alex is going to introduce this one.
All right. So we have an application for alteration under the Ontario Heritage Act for 13 Maitland Street. The property is located on the east side of Maitland Street, just south of King Street East, north of Lake Ontario, and is a part of the Kingston Yacht Club property. The property itself contains a 2-story limestone dwelling, clad in stucco with a low 2-story limestone rear addition, which is half clad in stucco. And the building was constructed in 1830, and it's often referred to as Saints Rest. So it was designated in 1984 under the Ontario Heritage Act, and it is described as Saints Rest. A large stucco building was built for John Plant Bauer about 1830, enlarged during the capital period. It had from then on a series of tenants. In the 1890s, it was given its present name by the male boarders, and in 1906, the Kingston Yacht Club acquired the property. It was also designated again in 2015 as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage District, and it is evaluated as being significant to the district. So the application before you involves 2 components. One is to repair a small area of stucco cladding with like-for-like material and color on the rear of, which is the east side of the principal dwelling. You can see on the screen there's a patch just above the bottom window that's in quite rough shape. The second part of the application, which is probably the more significant aspect, is to remove the remaining cement-based stucco cladding, which is on the rear 2-story addition, and then to follow up by repairing and repointing any of the exposed stonework as needed. So in terms of evaluating this application, staff went on site to meet with John Whalen and to take a look at the existing conditions and to understand the evolution of the building. We looked to the fire insurance plan of 1908, 1911, and this was simply to understand what the intended original material would have been. And as you can see, it's shown as being stone at the time, but with a stucco front porch, and the main building is still stone. The rear 2-story addition is stone as well. So this just reinforced our understanding after looking on site as well. We found a hole that was in the existing stucco, poked our fingers through, took a look, and basically found wood strapping, insulation, and in looking at the composition of the stucco, it appeared to be cement-based. So it was pretty clear to me, and as well as to other staff, that looking at our plans and looking at the building now, that these were a later addition. So we don't know exactly when the stucco went on these buildings, but sometime after 1911. And half of that stucco has since been removed on the 2-story rear addition. So the intention of the Yacht Club is they'd like to remove the rest of that cladding and to repair the stonework and expose the stones again. So in terms of looking at the old Sydenham HCD plan, removal of that stucco and the repair and repointing of the stonework is an enhancement to the cultural heritage value. And although this property is somewhat hidden at the back, it will once again reveal what is a heritage attribute of the building. So this supports section 4.3.2, which talks about the removal of non-heritage cladding. And in terms of the repair of the cement-based stucco in the principal building, although I think long-term there would certainly be a desire to also remove the cladding and expose the original stonework on this building, it would be quite an enhancement. Respect the fact that right now we're looking at a very small portion that is deteriorating and we're just repairing it like for like for the meantime. We have encouraged the applicant to potentially engage a heritage mason to do an analysis of the whole property. This is just a suggestion so that as and when the funds may become available to sort of phase the work in terms of repairing and removing, but that's by no means a requirement, it's just a helpful suggestion. So staff have a recommendation before you that these alterations are approved to repair the small area of stucco and to remove the remaining cement-based stucco cladding on the rear 2-story stone addition.
Thank you. So part 5, again, Don, you made comments in dash. Were they accurately? Yes. So we go to members of the public. Seeing none, we go right to the recommendation. Or no, you go. Sorry, member of the public. Sorry, I didn't see you over there. Please come to this microphone. Turn it on, and you can state your name and make your comment.
Yeah, thank you. My name is John Whalen. I'm from the Kingston Yacht Club. I do want to point out that the comment was made that the building is to the rear of the Kingston Yacht Club. So the clubhouse itself sits on the water. And the building that we're talking about is immediately behind that. The building is very, very visible, both from the water and from the street. So we're talking about the largest part of the building that is very visible from the water, from the Thousand Islands cruises, from the St. Mary, all of the ships that pass through. So we think this project is very oriented because it ties that building that has been drastically changed back to the original style that is surrounding it. All the buildings surround it are of that same style, and it'll be referring it back to that kind of limestone. So that's where we're coming from.
Okay, so it noted your comments in the file. Thank you. Any other members of the public? Right, so Heritage members now have a chance to add comments to the file. Mr. Vice Chair, I'd like to say something.
Right, I recognize you.
Thank you. I'm the district councillor for this area, and I just want to point out, like Alex was saying, 4.3.2, so this is not only heritage compatible, but it's actually accomplishing what we ask in the Heritage District Plan. So it's well-intentioned, it is very visible, as the member of the public just stated, and it does what the district plan asks, which is removing cladding that's been added to original facades, and all of these things together make it an excellent proposal, and I will support it. Thank you.
I return the chair.
So we need a mover and a for the recommendation that you see in your package. Moved by Mac, seconded by Jane. There's no debate, we just vote that Heritage Kingston supports council's approval of the following. It's just the alterations as described, the repair of the stucco, to remove of the stucco cladding, and to repair and repoint the new exposed stonework. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. Thank you, good luck. Next is 92 Gore Street, again, part 5.
All right. So we have an application for alteration under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So 92 Gore Street is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Gore and Wellington Streets. The subject property contains a 2-story limestone dwelling constructed circa 1839. The subject property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1984, and also designated as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District in 2015. And it is evaluated as significant to the district. The 1984 bylaw describes it as this corner house built in 1839 by Robert Waddingham, a carpenter and builder, had the Wellington Street wing added later. There have been many modifications. And in fact, actually, in looking through old photos there, this building has had quite the impressive restoration. I wasn't aware of how sort of eroded the integrity was prior to the current ownership. So the application before you is to replace the existing asphalt shingle roof with a standing seam metal roof color. The image before you is not of the property itself, but of the property that provided the inspiration for the style of roof that the owner would like to install. So in terms of our analysis, in going on site, the existing asphalt shingle roof appears to be in fair condition, but there are some areas that look to be deteriorating and needing replacement. And the proposed roof complies with Section 5.3.1, which speaks to the idea that replacement roofing should be compatible with the age and architectural style of the specific property. And in looking at the composition of this building and its roof configuration. It's a very simple roof, 2 connected gable roofs, and so in this instance, a metal roof would be very fitting. And in fact, the standing seam metal roof that is at 212 King Street and 44 Earl Street would be quite compatible with this building. So staff support this application, and we've just included 2 conditions, which is that if they should find any structural repairs to the roof, they'll need a building permit, and also that we do have details pertaining to the finalized choice on the standing seam metal roof so that we can ensure that the appearance is appropriate. So there's different widths of where the seams lie, and we want to just take a double check once they've selected that roof material. Thank you.
Thank you. So on page 91, you'll find Mr. Taylor's comments in dash. Is that correct? Accurate? Yes. I believe one of the aspects, just to point out to the committee, the aspects in that comment is one of the conditions here proposed by staff. So now we go to members of the public, if any. See, yes, come on forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I guess condition number 1 implies to me that there's something of a discovery phase going on, right? You're not necessarily sure what's there, and you'll have to kind of adjust as you go. So does that need to come back here if interesting things are found, or would you just, sort of carry on and I guess adapt to what's there? I'm just wondering, you're going to go down and see, and you may find things that are sort of independently interesting.
Thank you. Just a reminder to the public, questions are permissible. However, they are not answered at the time on Part 5 files. They will be internalized, and possibly the staff always has the option of speaking with you offline. So any other members of the public? Seeing none, members of the committee have a chance to add comments. Yes, Mac.
Somewhat to follow what comments where I presume this can be a real standing seam roof, not just the metal, barn kind of roofing that has corrugated seams in it.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, that is the intention as I understand it, so that's why we included that condition.
And so that'll probably be welded seams, so it'll be like galvanized, will it, or?
My understanding is that they want to do a traditional standing seam as we illustrated at 212. So in taking Dawn's comments into factor there, that was the intention behind the condition. So we'll wait to see what they bring forward. Thank you.
Any other comments, members of the committee? Remember that at this point, being added to the file by the clerk, the condition is here, and we don't have the ability to alter the conditions. We just have to vote yea or nay in the end. Yes, Don.
Certainly, it's acceptable to me. I think if they install modern interlocking panels, what I wanted to explain in my comment is that it should mimic the appearance of the traditional standing seam, but I think it's, if they want to build up a traditional roof and solder the joints and all that, that's fine, but I wasn't intending that they be required to do that, just to make the best choice that looks most of that period.
And I believe that's what it says in the condition. Planning staff to ensure that the proposed roof is compatible with the architectural style of the subject property and will conserve the cultural heritage value of the district. Mac, you want to add another comment?
So when they say a standing seam roof, it's a standing seam roof that is soldered. That's not a metal roof. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying anybody oppose the other roof, but that was my question. If it says it's a standing seam roof, then that's a soldered standard standing seam roof. It's not, it's not metal pre-finished painted panels or something. That's,
Yeah, I mean, we could repeat yourself, but basically the condition says that planning staff is to ensure that the proposed roof is compatible, whether it's a true standing seam or something else that's also compatible. It doesn't actually require them to do a standing seam roof. It just requires them to do a roof that's compatible. Okay, well, maybe we'll hear from staff. What happens if they are proposing a roof that is not a true standing seam, but is similar in appearance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the intent is that the roof will have the appearance of a traditional standing seam metal roof. There are a number of different profiles that could take, and I think that's the intent of this condition, is to ensure that because they hadn't actually picked the specific type, but we know their intention, and the intention is good, and we just wanted to be able to follow up with that to ensure that that appearance is compatible with the district plan.
I think I know what Mac's going to say. The condition says specifically standing seam metal roof. So
I don't necessarily have a problem with the anti-seam roof, just that that's what it says, and very few people do it, and I love it when they do it. I mean, it'll last 120 years, if it's a standing seam roof. It's just
council
curious.
will probably not understand this nuance, so unless we put it in the comments, there's no other way to get the point across to them. So I would ask members if they think that there might be some confusion and it could end up with something that we don't want to see from a heritage perspective, now is the time to put in your comment. Otherwise, it's going to council in its current form. I mean, that's the way it is. Mr. Newman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and Mac's comments. So if the issue is that it may not be a quote-unquote standing seam metal roof, but that it may be sort of a takeoff of a standing seam metal roof. If the concern is that the way the condition is written is it is saying you have to do a standing seam metal roof, period. If it made sense to the committee to recommend an amendment, staff wouldn't have any objection to an amendment that would just clarify that. So it could just be details pertaining to the selected metal roof be submitted and so on.
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Newman's however, the Part 5 rules of procedure don't allow for amendments. So, although I will allow a friendly amendment to clarify the language. So, and that would have to come from staff because staff is the one that writes the report to council. Remember, this is a council decision, not a heritage decision. So, I mean, this is, yes, Alex?
Shall I suggest the amendment as the writer of the staff report?
What I would say is you could tell us what the final report to council is going to say if you're thinking of altering the language a little bit to allow for that, that latitude. Because if we pass it as it is now, we, as heritage members, we understand it to mean an actual standing seam metal roof.
So we're happy to make the change to basically allow for the roof to be standing seam or other, but that it has the traditional appearance of a standing seam metal roof.
So we've heard from staff that the wording in includes actual standing seam metal roof or other roof that gives the appearance of a standing seam metal roof. That's what it means to them. Is that going to be in the minutes? Okay, so that's been captured in the minutes. If anyone on council has that question, we'll know how to explain it to them. Okay, I'm going to call the question. Need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Mac, seconded by Don. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. 5 Court Street, also in Old Sydenham. This is the fountain. It's very exciting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the subject property is the Frontenac County Courthouse property. It is designated under Parts 4 and 5 of the Heritage Act. It is a National Historic Site of Canada. The courthouse itself has a Heritage Trust easement on it under Part 2 of the Heritage Act. However, the fountain before us today is not part of that agreement. The application is related to the Kirkpatrick Fountain. The fountain itself was built in 1901-03 in memory of Sir George Airy Kirkpatrick, who was Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, in the 1890s. It was designed by architect Joseph Power. It is a noted landscape feature of the national recognition, and it is noted as significant to the district itself. The fountain is a multi-tiered round basins fountain with a pair of lions, one zinc, one concrete on the base, and a bronze water nymph on the top, and is followed by a base, granite lined base on the bottom. The application before you is to repair and restore the Kirkpatrick Fountain. This is a multi-year plan that includes cataloging, disassembling, repairing, and restoring many of the existing features of the fountain that are now leaking and rusting and are unfunctional. The replicating of missing or overly deteriorated features, replacing the mechanical waterworks system in the fountain, and reassembling the fountain in order for it to function as it was intended. The original paint colors on the fountain have been identified and are to be replicated and reapplied. The two lions and the bronze nymph statue are in relatively good condition, but they are also to be restored as required, as well as the concrete basin and granite surround is also in good condition and is to be repaired as necessary. The details are included in a detailed assessment that is in your agenda package that was prepared by a team led by Taylor Hazer Architects that included Hooker Surveying, Downey Engineering, Jet Welding and Ornamentation Ironworks, RJC Engineering, and Andre Scheinman, Heritage Consultant. In terms of our review, the proposed works to repair the metal, masonry, and mechanical portions of the structure will improve the longevity and allow this fountain to function as it was intended. Staff support the works as proposed. And as this initiative will take a number of years to complete, staff have included a rather unusual clause, but a clause in your recommendation that recommends exception to the Heritage Procedural Bylaw that typically limits heritage approvals to 3 years. This is to increase to 6 years to allow this project to undertake as planned, given the extent of it. We circulated this application. One of the only comments we received was from forestry with concerns and protection requirements for the trees in the area, in the vicinity of this statue, to ensure that equipment isn't piled and impacting the root system. It was circulated to this committee, and we didn't receive any concerns from the committee. And our recommendation, Mr. Chair, is included on the screen. We recommend approval with a number of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's one of our top-tier heritage attributes in the city, as noted by the comments by Mr. Taylor. I assume the comments were captured correctly. So this was subject to Part 2 and Part 4 of the Act, of the Heritage Act, before Part 5, Sydenham was created in 2015, but now that it's Part 5, that is the parent act now. So that's the procedure that we're using. So we're same as the others. So we go to members of the public for comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon. I'm supportive of this, but I do want to add in one comment. This fountain was vandalized very severely a number of years ago, and I think it was actually Queen's students who did it in something of a drunken spree or whatever. I was really sad to see that. And the cost for this is almost $100,000. for the current project of renovation. So that's very substantial. And I'm wondering if the committee needs to get into some of the details of spending. You know, it's a mid three-figure sum. Not saying it's not worth it. I don't have the background to assess that, but council may have some questions on that and as to what's needed and what's not needed and that kind of thing. So I would hope that the committee would maybe get into some of the debate on that. That's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Any other members of the public wish to comment? Seeing none, we go to members of the committee for final comments. Yes, Councillor Schell.
Something I hadn't thought of before, but what is the area going to look like when the fountain is being restored? In other words, what kind of hoarding is going to go up? You know, how will it look to the public in that it won't, hoping that it doesn't look like a sort of construction area for 6 years? You know, is there a plan to make it pretty during the work? The area, like a wrought iron fence or, you know, something to keep it from looking like a construction area for 6 years.
So questions are normally permissible, but if staff wants to just, that's not in the file, staff could just let committee members know before we vote. So we've got a member of staff here, Mr. Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The intention is to make it look very pretty in the end. During the process, it will be necessary to hoard it with metal scaffolding. There will be a crane on site, will be removing pieces. It'll look quite basic and may, in fact, not be there at all down to the foundation level. So no, there's no plan to create a screen that has an image of the finished version there or anything else. I think it will be a construction-looking site with proper signage and proper fencing. At this point in time, we do not have a budget for making the shrouding it in any fashion to make it look pretty while it's being restored. The process will be taking place hopefully this fall, and it will be hopefully put together again next spring, early summer, and operating, I hope, for next summer. So it's not for the 6-year time period that is in the application. That was really it makes sense to consider a long time period in case we run into anything that's small. But we hope to have this done within a reasonable time frame so that it's not going to be exposed for a long time. There's no budget at this point in time for making the construction site pretty.
I see Dr. Kingston say something. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'd add that there's probably an opportunity for culture to assist at least with a sign that could be placed on the scaffolding. It's something that we work with facilities on quite frequently. So when we did the pump house chimney repair, we were able to sign, or actually it was the addition to the rear yard, we were able to put a sign on the construction fencing, and I think it's reasonable that we could probably work with facilities to maybe put a picture of maybe either what's to come or maybe even just a historic image of how the fountain once looked. So we're certainly able to take that under consideration for sure.
Just to remind members that the clerk is putting your comments on file, so try to focus your comments in that direction. Thanks.
Just to continue, one of the reasons I even mentioned that is it's protection for the city, in my opinion. We get criticized as a city when things take a long time and they look like a construction zone, and it just, in my opinion, helps us in the long run to be proactive in how a construction site looks so that people, and I like Jennifer's comment very much, see what is happening, why it's happening, signage is a wonderful thing to help people understand what's going on, so when they walk by, they don't say, oh, for heaven's sakes. So, thank you.
Any other members of committee want to add comments? I'd like to add a comment, Mr. Vice Chair, if you'd take the chair.
I recognize you.
Again, as District Council for the area, I just want to put the comment that I agree with Councillor Schell's comments about the construction site appearance over a long period of time being an issue with residents, and therefore I hope that the work is able to be completed in a timely manner, and if not, Council may have to look at a budget line for appearances' sake if it's going to be a multi-year period. Thank you.
Return the chair.
Okay, any other comments? So we already went to members of the public, right? Yeah. Sorry, members of the public only have one opportunity to make comments, but you can send us an email at this point. Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Catherine, so that Heritage Kingston Sports Council's approval of the following. It's basically the fountain repair. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Good luck. Okay, the last heritage permit for today is 23 Sydenham Street.
Okay, so today we have an application for alteration for 23 Sydenham Street, which is located on the east side of Sydenham Street, south of Earl Street, and backing onto Lily Lane in the east. The subject property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act through bylaw number 2015, contains a 2.5-story wood dwelling constructed in circa 1866. So in front of you, you can see the front elevation. This application is actually dealing with the rear, where it backs onto Lily Lane. So in terms of its cultural heritage value, it is identified as being significant to the district. It was constructed in about 1866 by a builder contractor named John McMahon. Significantly, in the 1960s, the house was purchased by James and Lily Inglis. And I think most people here know that Lily was a renowned heritage advocate and architect, and she's known for numerous heritage restoration and renovation projects. And in 2010, the laneway behind this stretch of house, joining Earl and West Street together, was named Lily Lane in her honor. So the application before you is to install a new 6-foot wood fence along 3 property lines to meet the existing fencing and to fully enclose the yard. The intention is that the fence will have the appearance of the neighboring fence at 21 Sydenham Street. And it will also include a movable, the red outline there is just marking the corner approximately as to where it will abut onto Lily Lane. It will also include a movable fence panel on this property line and connect the south lot line where you can see the existing fence to the south. So in reviewing this application and looking to the old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District Plan, we really have to look to Section 7 of the plan, which addresses public and private landscapes, as this is the only real guidelines that would impact Lily Lane in any way. So we've got Section 7.2, which notes that laneways are important heritage attributes of the district and should be recognized as rights of way, which may provide access to private rear yards, accessory structures, and parking areas. So this proposal certainly supports the function of Lily Lane, continuing to provide the vehicular and pedestrian access to the rear of 23 Sydenham. And when we look to Section 7.5, which gives us design guidelines on landscaping on private property, it advises that if fencing on private property is to be considered, it should be of high quality and constructed in wood, picket, iron, wrought or cast, or stone. So in this instance, I believe when that district plan was written, I'm imagining that those guidelines largely were intentioned to relate to the front of house and thinking of sort of picket and wrought iron fencing. So in this instance, we have an area that's somewhat public, but it is the rear of a house and it is a rear yard. So we looked to those guidelines and we had to look then on site and existing conditions and what sort of fencing was already present along Lily Lane. And after we complete that site visit, we certainly noticed that there are a number of these simple wood panel fences similar to the one being proposed in the immediate vicinity. We also noted that this property is not immediately visible from either ends of the streets. It's sort of tucked into the lane. We had a couple comments from our Heritage Committee, one speaking to there would be a preference for more traditional appearance such as a picket fence, and also one of our members noted that this is one of the most famous laneways in the district and it gets a lot of foot and vehicular traffic, and so we really do need to think about the changes and alterations that occur along this laneway. That being said, staff certainly agree with this characterization and agree that a picket fence would be an enhancement to the district. But in looking at the existing character and conditions and the guidelines that we have within the district and the proposal, we do feel that it is compatible with the character of the laneway. And in evaluating against those guidelines and the policies, we find that the proposed fence will conserve the heritage attributes of the district, that being Lily Lane in this instance. And so upon review of all of our materials, we are supportive of the application, and we have a recommendation before you.
Thank you. So part 5, my comments were correctly captured, and Dawn as well. So we go to members of the public for an opportunity to add comments to the file. Seeing none, we will go to members of the committee for a final chance to add comments to the file. Yes, Jane.
I'd just like to reiterate, I would like the applicant to reconsider a style of maybe picket fence, and it would not only enhance the property itself, but also positively impact on Lily Lane.
Because make those comments, they will be added to the file. Catherine?
It's just a question. I recall in the past talking to Lily about the pathway from the front of the building to Lily Lane, and it was highly trafficked, that little pathway. And I'm just wondering if possibly it might have been a right of way.
Well, normally, if you had questions, you needed to make them to staff before the meeting because the procedures don't allow for an interaction, really. I presume staff wouldn't say they're supportive of the proposal if it infringed on a right-of-way. So I'm presuming the answer to that question is that it's not a legal right-of-way. Can I see confirmation from staff? Talking about the walkway between the two buildings from Sydenham Street to Lily Lane.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, there was certainly no rights of way marked on the survey that was submitted by the owner. If we do need further clarification, the owner of the property is present. Thank you.
Well, I think the question's been answered. This is exactly why we have procedures. It's not a conversation about things that aren't real. It's a conversation that you make in form of comments that are added to the file and goes to council. It's council that makes the decision. So I'm happy to let the member speak, or a member of the public speak, but that's not the procedure. Yes. I guess I'll just make a clarification comment. There's a difference between a public right-of-way and a shortcut that teenagers use to get from the front to the back of properties. I think that even if it's technically trespassing on private property, some laneways, or some of those small walkways are used in the district. I know I've seen people using it, but it still may not make it a public right-of-way. Don, you have something to file?
Just a comment that I hope appears in the file, that if the owner chooses to paint the fence, then the choice of color will have a large, big impact on for such a large fence. So that should, the owner should understand that that's part of the heritage attribute and appearance of the laneway.
Any other comments? Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. That Heritage Kingston supports Council's approval of the following, the alterations, essentially installation of a fence, and with the one condition. Who wants to move it? Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Haley. Okay, ready to vote? All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Working group reports. Okay, so there is just the Heritage Properties Working Group that met in this time frame, and their notes are right at the very end of the package, on page 166. It's a page and a half. We will need a motion to receive them. If people want to comment, it's before or after we receive it? Before. Right. So normally the member of staff has a chance to give us a quick introduction about the work of the Heritage Property Working Group. If not, members have a chance to comment on on what's in the notes. Yes, Mr. Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The briefing notes sort of cover our last meeting in I think pretty good detail. The only thing I would point out is under the item that refers to the Heritage Property Grant Program, we've had quite a significant uptake to the new grant program this year. We had, I think, 22 applications came in, and we're prepared to now award 10 of those based on the review and consultation with this working group. And we're going to be rolling those out shortly, hopefully with some new signage, show off the city's commitment to heritage conservation. And this working group has been very helpful in reviewing those that criteria and that ranking. So we're happy with that. And our next meeting is actually 2 weeks as opposed to our following the week following committee. So thanks. If I have any questions, I can help.
So it is on the last day, July 31st? Yeah. Okay. Any comments before we receive the notes? I would just comment as chair that the first item, Prison for Women, is subject to a council motion, as it states, from June 26th. Council shall remember that. So we'll just to state some facts. So Prison for Women has a designation bylaw. It's Part 4. The council motion mentioned, as it says here in the notes from Greg here on the second paragraph, the three things that it was a recommendation from staff that council passed, and it had 3 items: taller buildings, community benefit, and viewing the heritage attributes of the current designated bylaw. So that's the part that's relevant to us here. It would be appropriate for that work to happen at Heritage Properties Working Group, just as the Kingston Pen work was done there. The only question I have for staff is, notwithstanding the council motion, if we hadn't received council direction to review the designated bylaw, could we still review the bylaw and what we would, I presume the Heritage Committee could give the working group direction to review bylaws if it was brought to our attention that the bylaws needed updating, right? So is there a significant difference between what we what the normal business of the committee might be and the situation for Prison for Women? Here's my question.
Mr. Chair, I think the fact that the direction is coming from council probably elevates the urgency and some of the direction that we may take, although at the end of the day, it's going to be a question of how appropriate are any proposed changes to the bylaw itself.
Okay, so just because it's important members of the committee understand what our role is on this file. So normally, we would see perhaps a pre-consultation, as we've seen on other files, where the applicant comes, say for example, the 81 King Street file. They came to us first, and it was a complex application. There was a pre-consultation, and then there was a lot of consultation in the interim. Is that the kind of thing we're looking at here? Is there going to be a pre-consultation? Then we'll have some idea of what they're proposing, and then we'd have some sort of traction for the group?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think generally with the proposed development plans for this site, which my understanding are very much in their infancy, knowing the complexity and the importance of this property to the city, I think that through Paige Agnew, the Director of Planning, Building and Licensing, we probably will recommend that the applicant pre-consult with this committee as their design concepts evolve. Yeah.
Right, and when there's detailed work to be done, the work is a place where that happens, and then we get the reports, and council gets the recommendation, and so on. So it is going to follow the regular procedure for Part 4 designations, and it will at one point come to us for approval, but it'll also come most likely as a pre-consultation. And that will really help steer the conversation at the working group. So I guess my final question would be, would it be appropriate to have it on the agenda for the next working group meeting on July 31st? Is there anything further to discuss about maybe the existing designated bylaw? Should the working group become fully familiar with the existing designated bylaw in anticipation of the work that's going to come on this file? Would that make sense?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think Ryan manages the agenda with the working group. I think it'll be a question of what new information we may have. I don't believe we've received anything since this was presented to council, but Ryan and I can certainly work on that and making sure the right information comes forward.
Ryan, do you think the members would want the existing bylaw, or do you think they could do that on their own? Like, is that something that would be subject to discussion at the working group meeting? Just reviewing what the designating bylaw says?
Mr. Chair, I think it would be a good idea for members to familiarize themselves with the bylaw and understand what the complexities are. It is a rather detailed designating bylaw with a whole list of attributes, both interior and exterior. So I think to be familiar with it is a good idea. I think what we're missing at this point is clear direction on where we should be focused on that bylaw and what the challenges are for the developers. So there's something maybe we should be focusing on. The other challenge with this property is that what we're being asked to do is look at the interior attributes, and we would benefit from actually seeing the interior of the building, but given some of the existing condition of that building, that may be a challenge also. So I think we're at a point where we need to understand what our focus and direction will be from council's motion, and come with a plan to the working group when that's been all nailed down.
Great. So what he just said there is quite important. The council direction implied reviewing the interior designated items. There are some interior features that have been designated. If you read the bylaw, you'll see them. However, the state of the property does not allow for an internal visit. So I just want to bring that to the committee's attention. We're going to be reviewing something that we won't be able to witness ourselves. So we'll be relying on, I guess, photographic evidence that we already have and other means, unless there's some way staff can facilitate a safe entry to the building. Is that the, would that be the owner's prerogative, or is it more of a health and safety requirement that you're not allowed to enter something that's a hazard?
I believe it's a health and safety issue. Yeah.
Okay, any other comment on the working group notes? Yes, Jane.
Where can I find existing bylaw? Line, or is it in the packages of stuff?
Maybe staff could send an email to Heritage members and working group with a link to the designated bylaw.
I'd be happy to share it, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder to receive the working group briefing notes. Moved by Dawn, seconded by Jane. Any further debate? All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. That brings us to, there are no emergency approvals, no motions, no notices of motion, no other business. Any correspondence? No correspondence. Next meeting, right in the middle of August, August 15th. That meeting is required, correct? Yeah, there are already items set for that meeting, so we're going to have to come back in August. We need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mac, seconded by Councillor Schell. All those in favor?